So good afternoon, coming to you nationwide. I see people on from as far west as Phoenix, California, and our speaker today from Buckhead, Georgia. Are you in Buckhead, Tara?
Atlanta, yeah.
Atlanta, right? Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. We're glad you're with us today. We have been doing the daily dose for a few weeks. Now it's the twice a week dose on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I'd like you to know that we'd love to have you check back in on Thursday at 1 o'clock Central Time. For another great speaker. I'll tell you, we've been having a lot of offers of people to speak, and we've gotten really picky about the topic, so we're making sure that we continue to bring you value. I'm really excited about today because, you know, in this new world order, everything's topsy-turvy, and I don't know if anybody really knows what's coming next, but I can tell you communication is going to be key. And so the owner of Endpoint Communication, Ms. Tara Heaton, is with us, and I'm going to turn it over. She's going to talk to us about how to improve your message for this new virtual world order. Tara, it's all yours. Thanks for being with us today.
Awesome, outstanding. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen and dig in here.
I don't have to ask you if you're a native Atlanta. I hear it already in that accent. Coming from someone with a pretty bad accent himself.
Let's see here. Let me pull us up. I don't hear the accent, but people tell me I travel all over the country, and I hear constantly that
it sounds great. It sounds perfect.
Strong accent. All right, outstanding. I am going to dig right in and congratulate you all because I know that we're surrounded with small business owners, and that takes a lot of tenacity and a lot of energy. And one thing that I see really consistent across the board with business owners and professionals is two things really: passion and knowledge. And I see speakers and presenters, I see meetings where people are collaborating and they have plenty of knowledge and plenty of passion. And here's what else I see happening. We take this knowledge and this passion and we just continue to throw it at a board. And there's not a lot of strategy and there's not a lot of clarity, and we get a little bit frustrated, so we continue to just throw things at a board. Now, if you're old enough, you may recognize this. This is Pin the Tail on the Donkey. And I would imagine many of you remember Pin the Tail on the Donkey. There's no strategy, there's just a lot of hope. But what we know is that hope is certainly not a strategy. I learned that a long time ago. So what I plan for you all today is something very specific. It's important to me that I bring you all something in this short period of time that you can take with you and you can think, wow, I can use that right now and continue to hone that skill going forward. So simply put, I would like to help us to better communicate our ideas and our value. And just like Scott said, the importance and the ability to communicate clearly and with a compelling, memorable message is more important now than ever before. Quite interestingly, the skills when we're in a virtual meeting are not very different from when we're live. It's just that the skill is so much more important because we can lose people. People can become distracted. They can start looking up what they're gonna cook for dinner. Any number of things can distract people, as you know, text messages and social media if you're afraid you're going to be bored. So the message and the clarity in a virtual setting is absolutely paramount today. So here's my hope. Rather than pin the tail on the donkey, I will help you to define a really compelling, clear message every time you're in a meeting, whether you're collaborating and networking or whether you're presenting. So I'm going to offer you some really clear tips on how to do that. So just to frame where we're going from here, 3 things I'm going to do is, first, I'm going to tell you just a short story, the history of how I developed my platform, Talk to the Brain. I want to tell you just a little bit about that. And then I'm going to give you some facts about audiences and brains and listeners that apply in any setting. And then thirdly, and most importantly, I'm going to give you some tools for action. Because if I share some information and I don't give you a tool and the ability to act on it, then it's just a dream, right? You might be inspired, but it's just conversation and entertainment. So I want to give you the action. So let's start off with how I came to develop my platform, which is called Talk to the Brain. And it began back in 2005. I was at the top of my game in sales. I was presenting and selling. I was building a team of salespeople that reported to me. And I was the mother of 3 children. And my middle daughter was 12 years old at the time. And in January of 2005, she contracted, ironically, an unknown virus that caused her to have encephalitis. Well, she survived the encephalitis, but that caused her to have epilepsy, seizures. So throughout the year 2005, I watched a once vibrant, strong, powerful, energetic, talented young lady become very lethargic, unmotivated, and depressed. And this was due to all the seizure medication. So right before Christmas in 2005, I will never forget this moment. We were in the neurologist's office, a woman by the name of Dr. Barbara Weissman. And I said, Dr. Weissman, can we please take Caroline off these medications? Because look at her. I want my baby girl back. And she said no, because the way that Caroline's seizures travel, they run right across her hippocampus. And the hippocampus controls our memory and our ability to learn. And so that day, I went home, and rather than continuing my research on how to stop seizures, I began to research the hippocampus, which developed into research of the brain and human behavior. So here we are over 15 years later. And I'm sorry to say that Caroline's still having seizures, but much, much less than she used to. But through this journey, I've been able to really learn so much about the brain and human behavior and how we can affect it. So before I move forward, I want to make one thing really, really clear about this messaging. I have been in sales and communication and presenting for all of my career, and I never, ever would suggest that we use this information to manipulate or to sell something that we're not proud of, or to encourage people to do something that we don't believe in. Actually, it's quite the opposite. What I am encouraging us to do is to respect and understand the minds of our colleagues and our audience and our prospects so that we can honor them. And the more that we know about how our minds work, the better we can be at communicating and helping and sharing a service or an idea that we really believe in. So that is a little bit of the story behind Talk to the Brain. And before I give you the techniques, I want to zoom us in to some specific information that we're going to focus on. There she is. There she was when she was 12 years old. And there she is on the right. That's Caroline when there she is today with the American flag. And that is a snapshot of what I've spent the last 15 years doing, is studying the workings of the brain as it relates to the art and sport of communication. So one thing that I want us to always remember that is pretty simple, and I would imagine that most of you know this, but we forget this when we start to communicate and our passion takes over and we have this enormous amount of knowledge that we want to share. And it becomes overwhelming to people that we're communicating with. So please, I encourage you to remember these facts that I've taken from the brain. This is how we learn, through either intrigue or emotion primarily, and then with repetition or accountability. So let's think about that for just a minute. We remember things that are intriguing, so they're unusual, they're novel, they're unexpected, and or something that's emotional, either painful or exciting or pleasurable or sad. Any emotion causes our brain to remember things. So when we're communicating with folks, it's important that we remember to share something, maybe an emotional story or something that's relatable or something that's unexpected. And then the second piece is the repetition or accountability. So once we become interested, the only way for people to really remember and act is for them to repeat or apply again and again until it's committed to memory. So how do we make sure that that happens? We're intriguing and or emotional. And we're going to dig into that just a little bit. The other way that people remember things is accountability. And that just takes you back to school. If you have to remember something for a test because you're going to be accountable to know that, then you're innately motivated to learn it. So that's the two things that drive the learning from intrigue and emotion. I cannot see any faces or hands up or questions. Do you all have a mechanism where I need to stop for clarity or anything like that, or shall I just charge on?
Daniello can read out anything that comes in the chat, so you can charge on and he'll start to jump in.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you. So what we're going to talk about is how overwhelming this screen is, this particular screen, and this is an idea that will only resonate, I hope, with you as what not to do. I have studied neurotransmitters specifically because we have the power to control them in our brain, but I don't want you to worry about that. I want to focus today on only 2 neurotransmitters, and I bet that you've heard of both of them. But these are the 2 neurotransmitters, dopamine and oxytocin, that we have the most ability as a communicator, a speaker, a networker. We have the ability to affect these, and this is what causes people to become interested, and then to connect and to have trust and to make a business or professional or personal connection. Now, I would imagine that most of you, when you think about dopamine, this is what's odd about this virtual setting, is I would love to hear what's going through your mind. But I've asked this question in a live setting many times, and people say, dopamine, oh yeah, exercise, spicy food, something exciting, something fun, social media. I want you to really understand what dopamine is. Dopamine is not pleasure exactly. What dopamine is the feeling that you get when you are looking forward to pleasure. It's the anticipation of something. So one of the best examples is when you see young people, or not necessarily young people, but people who are really into video games. That really amped up the study of dopamine, because what the person playing the video game is after, they're after a reward. So dopamine is driving those video games. Another great example is I learned through watching Caroline's brain, her brain has been damaged all these years, and she's a very clear, simple example of how our brain works. And she goes on the computer and she does jigsaw puzzles, and dopamine is driving her to get to that very last puzzle piece. So how does this apply to us? We want to infuse dopamine in the minds of our audience early on by saying something unexpected, something novel, something unusual. That draws people in. The second neurotransmitter that we're going to focus on is oxytocin. And this one takes a little bit more time to develop, but it lasts a long time. This is the king of neurotransmitters, and it's also a hormone. Oxytocin is the feeling you get when you feel trust, bonding, love, and connection. And that's what's going to serve our relationships long term, right? So dopamine might draw somebody in initially with something interesting, but it's oxytocin through sharing bonding moments, truthful moments that connects people. And then we really have the ability to develop business relationships long past a speech or a collaborative meeting. The third thing that I want us to focus on before we move forward is the way that our brain actually functions when information comes through. As you know, and this has been stated, but I just cannot reinforce it enough, it's been stated by so many people, is the distractions today are so much more prevalent than they were even 10 years ago. With cell phones and internet and all the different things that we can do to distract ourselves, our brain needs clarity and simplicity. Not only because there's a chance that the brain can become distracted, but guess what? We've become addicted to it. Our brain is used to triple tasking. We check text messages, and then the phone rings, and the television, and we're on a Zoom meeting, and we're trying to write a blog. We have become used to that. So the only way to really make sure that our audiences remember what we're sharing is to simplify it for them, and not hope, like pin the tail on the donkey, that we just throw out enormous amounts of information and hope that some of it sticks, so to speak. I'm going to show you a really easy process to help people to remember the valuable knowledge and passion that you have to share. So let's talk about presenting first. As I mentioned, I wanted to tell you a little bit of a history of Talk to the Brain. And now I'm going to give you some really concrete tips that you can use when you're presenting and also when you're in a collaborative or networking meeting. So I'm going to give you the top 4 based on what I'm seeing today, where I really see that people could greatly improve their presentations. And the first one is something that I rely on constantly, and it's a little acronym that I call FORCE, which is misspelled obviously, but it's 4 things that I want you to check for when you're presenting. Have you framed your message? So remember in the beginning, as I try to model this, so I told you where we're going. We're gonna accomplish 3 things. I'm gonna give you some history, some facts, and some tools. So I framed it and I organized it for you. Then it's also very important, based on what we know about how people learn and remember, is to reinforce what we're sharing. People hesitate a lot of times to restate things. Well, I've already said that, so now I'm going to say it a different way, and a different way, and a different way, and that makes me go back to pin the tail on the donkey. It is really important to define a phrase and reinforce it. So I want you guys to remember FORS, force, frame, organize, reinforce, and then simplify your message. Don't share 14 different messages, because very few of those will be remembered. Frame, organize, reinforce, simplify. Another great tip that I would encourage you all to work on is to use the word we versus I or you as often as we can. Because I'm not a perfect speaker, I will never be a perfect speaker, and I can continue to improve and get better. So when we talk about how the brain works or how best to deliver a message, let's use the word we. It causes people to let their guard down and causes people to want to lean in and really learn from you when you say we. Talking about slides here, when I say use simple pictures, we have a tendency, and I've seen this many times, is we develop these very elaborate graphs and charts and all different kinds of things to read on a slide. Here's the facts about the brain. About 2% of people are able to read and listen at the same time. 2%. The rest of us average folks, we need to do one or the other, either listen or read. So if you have something that you really want your audience to read, then give them time to read it. All right? Let them read it and then speak to it. Don't try to do both, because you dilute either message. And finally, just as you see that I'm doing here, it's really helpful if we transition in short phrases. It's a very easy thing to do. I think it's called transition in Keynote and animation in PowerPoint. Rather than putting up 15 bullets and then trying to speak to them, people are reading those. Go one at a time, make it super clear, and transition them in so people can focus on exactly what you are speaking to at that moment. So those are just 4 of my mini tips about presenting, especially in a virtual setting. I would encourage you to apply these next time you have the opportunity to present. Let's talk about some tips for collaborating and networking. So you're in a meeting and it's your time to contribute something, or you have an idea. How can you best communicate those ideas effectively and be a valuable member of the meeting? I'm going to go back to the first thing I said with presenting. Frame, organize, reinforce, and simplify. Force. Even in a small contribution in a meeting, frame what you're going to say, organize it, reinforce it, and simplify it. And when I say reinforce, I mean to kind of summarize it. So that's even important when you have just a short opportunity to make a contribution in a speaking setting. The second one, I see a lot of folks, including myself, that struggle from being unique in their value. And this is something that we can never just put on a shelf and say, okay, it's done. What do I mean by define your unique value? What I mean by that is, opposed to my saying to you all, I'm a communications coach or I'm a message strategist, I need to be able to say in a very few amount of words what specifically I do that I do better than anyone else. And I encourage each of us to give that a lot of thought, because you might have 5 lawyers or 5 real estate agents or any type of title. And if we can't share how ours is specific and unique to the others, then we have positioned ourselves into an uphill battle. So what do I do specifically? I can tell you that I help professionals to craft and deliver messages that move people. That is what I do. That's what I'm able to give back to the professional community. And I know it is committed to memory, and I can speak to it. And I'll say it one more time. I help professionals craft and deliver messages that move people. If I simply share my mission statement, people are going to say how, and that's my how. That's how I do it. Another encouragement during meetings, and we all tend to think about what we want to say next, or something will spark our interest, and what happens? We get distracted and we start thinking about something. I just want us to all work hard to discipline ourselves to actively listen and acknowledge whomever is speaking, rather than thinking about what we're going to say next. That makes for the most powerful meeting. And I know that we know this, it's still hard to do, especially when you're thinking about framing, organizing, reinforcing, and simplifying your message. But you know what? We can work on this consistently. Listen to the speaker and allow your mind and your message to be morphed by that. That's what makes for powerful collaborative meetings. Sell your truth. I also see the temptation, especially with new young entrepreneurs, to present something more than they are, or something different than they are, or try to avoid the truth about their status in their business. And I could not encourage us more to think about, if we're just starting out in a new business, or we don't have the clients that we hope we had, or we're not able to sell a particular value, then focus on that and the value of that. Here's a great example. When I used to coach young, brand new sales reps, they would go out into the field and they would be threatened by the competitor. So they would try to position themselves to be like the competitor, but they always fell short because they weren't. So I said, why not turn around the value of being a brand new salesperson? Who understands more than you what prospects and clients are thinking, because you're not conditioned in your industry yet? Secondly, if you're starting out and you're brand new, who's going to be more devoted, more passionate, more malleable, more flexible than you? I just want to encourage us to focus on the value of our truth and our status, no matter what that is. So these are 4 tips for collaborating in a networking meeting. I hope you all remember FORS. We'll get back to that one more time. Define your unique value. Think about what makes you unique in your field and focus on that. If not, we position ourselves in an uphill battle. Actively listen to others, and then think about what the truth of your status is. Don't shy away from it. Own it and use that as your value.
Hey, Tara, I got a comment question in from Mark Lively.
Okay, cool.
He says, powerful concepts, thank you. How would you recommend employing FORS with complex or multi-point presentations where all points are of equal importance?
Well, I would be a little challenging on that, because if all the points are of equal importance, so I'm not gonna challenge it. If you have 10 points that you feel like are equally important, then you know what they need? They need a frame. They need a concept. So I would suggest categorizing them and giving them all if you truly feel like, and I'd love to talk about this in detail, depending on what these items are. But if you truly feel like they're all important, then use short phrases to share them, not long paragraphs, and use an acronym, as you'll see me do, and I have other acronyms in learning. Acronyms are great to help people remember. So you could go with an acronym and then give them a name, a title, a focus. Is that helpful?
I'm sure he'll chime in a second. I was actually thinking along the lines, and I'm not sure if this falls in place, but network in action kind of has multiple points that are mutually beneficial for us as an organization, but also for our end users, right? So we have the concept of networking. And what we did was we tried to gamify that concept. And so where all these points are equal, call it, passing a referral or attending a meeting, are more or less equal, but they all share a different score. And so that's how we approached it, by turning it into a game, and you ascend up the ladder as you engage with the concept. Does that work?
Totally. And I love the game piece, because you know what you've got there is you got dopamine flowing. So congrats on that. It's so cool. I would also say that when you have, and obviously like my business, I have like my value pillars, and there's a list of those. And I will rarely share all of those. What I will do my very best to do is to know my audience, either through groundworking, like digging in and asking questions and finding out. If it's a large audience and you really don't have any way to categorize the audience, then certainly share all those pillars, but make them the same. So if you're going to phrase them one way, give them the same phrase over and over again. If somebody hears it 3 times in a presentation, they're much more likely to commit it to memory. But if those value statements, if you say them a little bit differently each time, which people tend to do, it confuses the brain. It causes a little bit of cortisol. Like, wait a minute, they said, and then the confusion becomes distraction. So if you are in a setting where you don't really know your audience, then I would take all those pillars or those value points, and I would make sure that you're stating them exactly the same way each time. Is that helpful?
He says, very much thankful. Thank you. I tend to use a sentence or an acronym, so thank you for reinforcing that.
Sweet. That's what I wanted to do actually at this point, is give us a little bit of a review. I think, let me see here. I'm not as much under time as I thought I was. I don't typically try to fill up time just to take time, because that's when we end up offering, as much knowledge as we possibly can. So I'm gonna bring us to an end with a short review, and then I'll turn it back over to you all for questions or however we want to proceed. So just to reiterate, these are the exact same words, just like I recommended. How do we learn? Intrigue or emotion, repetition or accountability. And one drives the other. You all remember that? Intrigue or emotion makes somebody interested. And then when they apply it or repeat it, they're more likely to remember it. Or if they're accountable, they're going to be tested. Okay, I think we've all gotten this one. FORS. I cannot say it enough. It will really help us. If we've got the intrigue and the emotion going, let's drive this home by making sure that we frame, organize, reinforce, and simplify the message. And I'm going to share just one more screen with you, which really encompasses a lot of my Talk to the Brain platform and coaching. We've touched on some, but this is a valuable piece. If you have a pen, if you just jot down force and you jot down what I'm about to share next, I really trust that it will take all your knowledge and passion and help you to really make sure that that message is on point. And I'm going to speak to the top left corner first. And I'm going to do this intentionally because that's where people's eyes tend to go. Especially in a virtual setting, we must speak to value. And I tried to do that by letting you all know that we were going to talk about improving your ideas and your ability to communicate your value in a variety of settings. So what's in it for me? Why should I listen to the speaker? Tell what the value is early on, especially in a virtual meeting. A touch of emotion lets people know that you're real, that you live a life just like they do, that there's a story behind why you're so passionate about what you do. And I tried to share that again in a very simple way through the genesis of how I began to study the brain. We talked about dopamine. Don't be predictable. Be novel, be unique, be unusual. Say something that takes a little bit of risk and courage, because I promise you, people will lean in and think, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Be truthful. That's harder to do than to say. Don't try to be somebody you're not, or try to emulate competitors, or try to sound more than you are, because quite honestly, it won't allow you to connect with people and build relationships. You'll put yourself in that uphill battle. Share the value of your truth, no matter what that is, and your fears. That's what will cause bonds for years to come. And then I bring this all down to simplifying the message. We've got to simplify it because people's brains today are distracted. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of distractions that people are focused on, but also there's distractions that we just don't have any control over. So we've got to simplify the message for folks. I hope that this has been helpful, and I did try to, just as somebody mentioned, I did really try to just put in the most valuable, most important points. There's so much more where this came from, but I wanted it to be something simple and clear that I hope you guys can grasp and apply tomorrow. So thank you so much for letting me be a guest.
You are more than welcome. Thank you for donating your generous time and your talents. Do we have questions over there, Daniela?
We got one more from Craig Klein, and we also have a lot of accolades coming your way, a lot of thank yous. Craig asked, can you provide some more technique values on honing my techniques? I'm not sure if I read that correctly. Can you provide some more?
Give Craig the microphone.
Yeah, Craig, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was looking for some more techniques to define my unique value. So can you provide some more input on how we can hone that in a little bit more?
Craig, why don't you talk about your business just for a minute so Tara can sort of get a better idea.
So I'm a commercial energy broker. So we provide electricity provision for brick and mortar businesses.
All right. And what makes you the very best choice out there?
Well, we shop the market with a number of different providers, and we can forecast out up to 2 years to stack contracts to make the best value for our clients.
Tara, Craig is like many of our members, and I'll go through a couple industries. If you think about it, when you hire a CPA, yes, you write a check, but typically they're going to save you money on the taxes. When you hire a business attorney, yeah, you're paying their hourly rate, but they're going to save you money and trouble and headaches later. When you hire a commercial realtor, they're going to help you with the lease. When you hire Craig, you're going to get an expert to look at your utilities, your power usage, and he's going to be able to weigh in, and he knows and has information that the rest of us don't have. So how does he message that?
I think without digging in, this is what my business is all about, like digging into this discovery and really pulling the stories out and some phrases that you can own and make conversational, because marketing, what's on a website is completely different than what you own out there in the real world. But to answer that just in this short period of time, one of the most powerful ways to really define your value and make it real and memorable is to think of a time when you really, really touched a client. Work on that story and find a way to lead with that early on in your conversations. If I may, let me share a time with you when, and then you say, somebody went with another provider and then came back to you, or you'll never forget the time that client so-and-so said this to you. Something that touches the heart, because you're trying to lead with a spreadsheet of facts and dollars. And that's, again, then you're gonna find yourself negotiating on price, and price and value aren't the same, as you know. And I also want to say, feel free to reach out to me. I won't try to sell you. In this climate, I think that we need to be helping each other, and that's what I'm here to do, and I mean that. Be happy to help.
Awesome. Any more questions, Craig, from there? Awesome. So I'd like to leave you with a little value-added tip if we don't have any questions. Every single one of us, if I am, all of us are capable of running a Zoom meeting, and it's free. And I really want to encourage all of you business owners to take a minute, reach out to your 2 or 3 top customers and offer an opportunity to give them a testimonial and have them give you a testimonial. And all you got to do is hit that little record button at the bottom of your Zoom, and then you can turn that into social media posts and links to your website and all kind of good information going forward. So take an opportunity to get a couple of testimonials from your existing customers during this time where you got a little extra time. It'll pay dividends going forward. So thank y'all very much for joining. If we don't have any more questions, we'll cut this off and look forward to seeing you all on Thursday. Hopefully you can meet us at 1 o'clock on Thursday for the Daily Dose. Thank y'all and have a great, safe couple of days.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.